I really believe that there is no such thing as a dumb question, but there are certainly low effort questions and high effort questions. And that's what we want to talk about here. Like there is a huge disparity in the quality of questions people ask. And so how you ask the question and the quality of it will really determine how much value you're going to be able to extract from the answer, or how compelling it'll be for other people to answer their question.
Hopefully this meme captures
Yeah.
my thoughts when it comes to yeah, like really relatively low effort questions. So something important to understand, and this applies to a lot of things within, I mean, not just tech, but kind of life in general, is that questions are an exchange of time. When you're asking a question, you put some amount of time crafting the question. And what you are asking from the audience you're asking the question to is you're asking for their time to read through the question, absorb it, and then provide you some sort of answer. And humans naturally do not like gross imbalances of time. If you provide 5 minutes of your time to ask a question, and this question is just so complex, it doesn't have the context necessary to really like make it easy to answer. If this question takes like an hour at least to answer, that is not good, right? Because now people don't really have an incentive to answer your question because if they go, okay, well, this person is dealing with this super complicated thing, but they didn't really attach enough resources to really break it down. And clearly, like they could have done more to ask this question. So like, why would I spend like an hour essentially following up and asking all these follow-up questions to essentially increase the quality of the question for them, and then finally kind of pull an answer out of lots of after lots of like hard work and pain, right? And so that's captured by this meme on the right. Like there are just some questions, like because there's so many complicated things in tech, so it's really easy to ask a question in a space that's super complex, and the barrier to entry to asking a good question is pretty high, just because the space is really complex. You need to attach a lot of context and information about yourself and what you're trying to do in order to make that question easy to answer. So yeah, I've gotten lots of questions like this before, where it's like, 2 or 3 lines, and then it's like some really, really like grand high level ask. I think a pretty common one is like, oh yeah, I've just started in computer science. I'm like a student or something. Alex and Rahul, can you tell me how to be a good developer? We're just like, well, there's like a million ways to be a good developer. We don't know like where you go to school or like what kind of software you want to build or anything. So like, what do we do here? So if you're asking a question, and again, this is another thing that ties into a lot of what we talk about. It's also an exercise in empathy and putting yourself in another person's shoes. So when you're asking a question, what you want to do is, pretend your question has been sent out. So as you're typing up the draft, and then put yourself in the shoes of someone who's now reading the question and trying to answer it, right? Like, what is their experience like? And if their experience is bad because like your question doesn't have enough stuff, then you should fix that. You should add more stuff to your question. If you think the question is good because you've essentially preemptively covered like every single thing that the potential answerer might ask or try to clarify about the question, then that's great. Ship it. So we have a lot of tactical advice on like how to really show this good empathy for the answerer. Rahul, I think you should take it away because I think you feel passionately about the first one. You can explain what that is and like why you hate it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So this one is a big one because on LinkedIn and to some degree Slack as well, but especially on LinkedIn and like Twitter, there's a lot of people who will just DM me, like direct message me and say hello. And I don't really know what they're expecting. Like, are they expecting me to say hello, how are you? Or like they'll ask me like, how's your day going? And it's like, I don't, if I, unless I have like a social relationship with you, it's a little bit like, okay, what do I do now? Because now I'm gonna say, how are you? And then, like we're gonna spend another 2 or 3 hours like getting to the point where now we can actually have a meaningful interaction. And there's actually a website called nohello.net. You guys can check it out if you want, but that basically will go through the idea of why you should typically embed the question in your initial reach out. So definitely, I think like a pet peeve of people who get a lot of questions, like a senior engineer at a company, they probably get tons of pings. And I've heard this from many of them as well. It's like, I really don't like when people just ping me and then they wait for me to prod them to like get the question out. So the big thing here is just like embed all the context right away so that that's like the point of asynchronous communication, right? You want to avoid the number of back and forths that you have. The second one is passing the first round Google test, which I think this is something that Alex, I don't know if you invented it, Alex, it was like something that you found, but this is, I love this way of framing it. Basically that if you haven't done the due diligence to basically Google for your problem and like scan through the results, then that doesn't give me that much confidence that you've put in the effort that now I should now spend, 10 or 20 minutes of my time helping you out. Right. So like at a bare minimum, if you have like a bug or if even just a general question, like how do I become a good software developer? The first thing you should do is Google that. And then in your question, embed the knowledge that you actually did that legwork and say, hey, like, I did Google it and here are a couple things I found. Here's why I thought they were insufficient or they didn't apply to my scenario. So here's what's unique about me and why I'd love your help. That way, I think you're going to get a lot more engagement and a lot more kind of empathy for, okay, we can understand why you're asking this question. And here are some things to do to like get unblocked or to give guidance. Second is explain what you've tried, which is, again, kind of linking it back to the Google example. Like you want to explain you're stuck somewhere or you have a question. The first thing you do shouldn't just be, let me ask someone who has done it before or who's more senior. Like you should do a little bit of work on your own to figure out if this has been answered before or if there's some way you can get unblocked on your own before engaging with people. Because these chat messages and things, Alex and I love to do it, but it does get to a little bit there is a time involvement, right? And so you want to make sure that time involvement both sides are getting some value out of it. And then next is attach context, because instead of just saying I have this image loading issue, which we'll actually go through an example of a good and bad question in the next few slides, but you want to be able to attach enough context because, like Alex mentioned, tech is just so complicated, and so if you ask something generic, it's very hard to actually diagnose what is the real issue. So you want to always make sure you have enough information in the question that someone reading it can take action on it and kind of figure out or point you in the right direction. And then, of course, this goes without saying, but you have to be nice and appreciative, right? You're trying to get help. And so the people giving you help want to feel as if their time is being spent on someone who will actually act upon their guidance. And a simple thing like thank you, or thank you in advance for whatever time you spend, or when they reply, actually following up with them, those go a really long way in kind of building up that social capital. That's especially important in a company where you're going to be interacting with the same group of people day in, day out. And the other thing I want to mention here is that I think software has a very interesting property in that there is no physical limit to what you can build. Unlike in chemical engineering, mechanical engineering, many other disciplines of engineering, there's a very clear limit to like what you can construct, right? Because like you have to like put things together physically. But software is so interesting in that the limit to what you actually build out as a computer program, as a software program, is really limited to how much can our brains handle the complexity. That's really how it is. And that's why we've developed all these different patterns and architectures of figuring out how do we organize software modules and different APIs, right? And the consequence of that is that you really have to be really precise in your question about what you want help with. Where are you operating in the stack? Like what APIs or what different research have you done? Because both for you and the question answer, there's so many things that could go wrong. There's so many things that you could try. And so you want to kind of embed all that information and acknowledge the complexity or whatever you've tried in the question. So I just wanted to make that comment that, software is really unique in how complicated it is compared to other domains. And so you need to be aware of that when you are asking the question.